On June 12, 2026, a stock ticker did something no ticker had ever done. It minted a trillionaire. SpaceX went public at a $2 trillion valuation, the largest IPO in history, and Elon Musk's net worth popped to roughly $1.1 trillion. One man, with a 12-0 fortune. And here is the strange part nobody puts in the headline: he can't spend it. Not won't. Can't. Most of it isn't money. It can't legally be sold for a year. And the moment he tried, it would start to evaporate. This is the story of what $1 trillion actually is, and the machine that conjured it in a single Friday. First, calibrate. 1,000,000 seconds is 11 days. 1,000,000,000 seconds is 32 years. 1 trillion seconds is 32,000 years. Spend $1 million a day, starting today, and your great-great-grandchildren would still be working through the first $500 billion in the 28th century. $1.1 trillion is bigger than the annual economy of all but roughly 15 countries. Want it concrete? It could buy every team in the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, and the NHL, the entire landscape of American sports, with a few $100 billion left over. The number is so large that asking, what can it buy? Misses the point. Because as we're about to see, mostly, it can't buy anything. It isn't there. Open the actual filing and the fortune demystifies fast. Musk owns about 4.8 billion SpaceX shares, roughly 42% of the company, plus hundreds of millions of options. His net worth is just that share count, multiplied by Friday's price. 4.8 billion times $150. That's it. That's the trillion. There's no vault. No account with 12 zeros. The fortune is a multiplication, and one of the two numbers changes every second the market is open. When the stock rose 11% on debut day, he made more than $100 billion before lunch. Nothing arrived. A number moved. Net worth isn't a pile. It's a price times a promise not to test the price. So why not just sell? 3 locks on the vault. Lock 1 is literal, the IPO lockup. Musk can't sell a single SpaceX share for a year after listing. Standard terms, insiders dumping on day 1 would scare off every buyer. Lock 2 is physics. His stake is 42% of the company. There is no buyer for that. Selling even a few percent floods the market and pushes the price down with every share that leaves. Lock 3 is psychology. The founder selling is the news. The moment he sells big, the market asks what he knows, and the price he's selling at starts to rot. $1 trillion fortune is a photograph of a price nobody is allowed to disturb. Touch it, and it blurs. And yet the man buys things. Companies even. So where does the cash come from? He borrows it, using the untouchable shares as collateral. A bank will happily lend billions against stock. The shares stay unsold, the price stays undisturbed, the loan arrives as real, spendable cash. The filing shows the machinery, shares pledged as debt collateral. And in one delicious detail from the past, SpaceX itself once lent Musk $1 billion. His own rocket company, as his personal bank. Borrowing beats selling for a second reason: selling triggers capital gains tax. A loan is not income. We made a whole video on that trick: buy, borrow, die. The trillion can't be spent. But it can be borrowed against forever, which is almost better. Now rewind to Friday morning. Where did the trillion come from? Nobody handed SpaceX $2 trillion. The IPO raised about $75 billion, real money, but 1/30th of the valuation. Here's the machine. The company sold 555 million shares at $135. The market then repriced them at $150. And that public price got stamped onto all the shares, including the 4.8 billion Musk never sold. A price discovered on 3% of the company revalued 100% of it. That's what an IPO really is, a crystallization event. Private guesses become a public number, and the number becomes everyone's net worth. Critics call it a wealth transfer, early insiders cashing the public's optimism. Fans call it price discovery. Both are describing the same Friday. Is this the richest anyone has ever been? Depends on the ruler. John D. Rockefeller's fortune peaked around $1.4 billion in the 1930s, pocket change today, but back then it equaled more than 1% of the entire U.S. economy. Musk's $1.1 trillion is several percent of today's U.S. GDP, which puts him, by share of economy, in Rockefeller's neighborhood. The neighborhood has been empty for 90 years. But there's a difference in the substance. Rockefeller's wealth was oil in the ground and refineries on it. Musk's is a multiple on expected futures, Mars, Starlink, robots, AI. Old fortunes were measured in what the assets did. New fortunes are measured in what the market believes they'll do someday. And we know the reverse gear works, because it has receipts. The same man holding today's record also holds the other one. Between late 2021 and the end of 2022, Musk's paper fortune shrank by roughly $200 billion. Guinness certified it, the largest personal fortune loss in history. He didn't misplace a vault. Tesla's share price fell, and the multiplication did the rest. Same shares. Smaller number. Or ask Masayoshi Son. In early 2000, the dot-com boom briefly made him richer than Bill Gates, for about 3 days. Then the crash erased some $70 billion, at the time, the most anyone had ever lost. Nobody took their money. There was never money to take. Paper wealth doesn't get spent down, it gets repriced. Sometimes by Tuesday. So when you read, "World's First Trillionaire," hear the asterisk, measured at Friday's close. Monday gets a vote. So does next year. Gravity never fully signs off. Which brings us to the fine print on the whole trillion, it's conditional. If the market mood turns, if the next mega IPOs stumble, if rates bite, if Mars stays far away, the same multiplication runs in reverse. 40% of SpaceX times a lower number is a much smaller trillionaire. This IPO is also the opening act. OpenAI and Anthropic, valued near $1 trillion each, are expected to follow it onto the market. The first trillionaire may shortly have company, all of them paper. None of this means the wealth is fake. Borrowed against, it buys real things and real power. But it means the precise number is theater. The market doesn't know what Musk is worth. It knows what the last share traded for. So, the first $1 trillion fortune is a share count times a Friday price, locked for a year, unsellable at scale, spendable only through loans, and reversible by mood. That's not a criticism. It's the actual mechanics of modern wealth, and they apply all the way down. Your house's value is also just the last comparable sale, also untested until you sell. The first trillionaire exists. The first $1 trillion, that part is still mostly a promise.